learning objective, explain financial planning, and define the 8 planning domains. Financial planning is a process. It's not a product. And so often in financial planning, we have to remember that the client is coming to us for what is in our head, to help coach them through the planning process. So what is financial planning? Financial planning is a process, and it's a process that helps us first ascertain the client goals. What are the goals? Well, let's really pare down on those goals in a little more depth. So you want to be able to retire? All right, well, let's talk about when. What kind of lifestyle are you looking for? What are some barriers that might get in the way? Financial planning is the process that helps take that client goal and flush it out to a real pinpoint needle solution. And just like we want to know what the goals and objectives are, secondly, financial planning helps develop a plan of action for achieving those clients' goals. Now, we only have so many resources for a client. Resources are scarce. And so any client goal can be met with, well, we can save for it, we can spend out of income to meet it. And in a world of limited resources, we need a process to help that client determine which of their resources they allocate towards which goals and which resources they allocate towards spending today. Financial planning is a process. And that process is conducted by going through 8 unique domains. And so we're going to talk about the domains of the financial planning process. And I'm going to cover them as an aggregate group, and then we're really going to flesh out what goes into each domain in the following slides. The first thing we need to do is establish the client relationship. So we need to really decide, what am I going to do for the client and what am I not going to do for the client? For that matter, how am I getting paid to work with the client? And does the client understand my expectations of them? With this in mind, we establish the client relationship. The second domain of financial planning is gathering the appropriate data. Well, we don't really know what to gather until we've established that relationship. So you can see how they start to really flow one after another. So when it comes time to gather data, I'm going to look for tax returns. I'm going to look for analyticals. I may have a fact finder questionnaire, a risk tolerance questionnaire. What I'm trying to do is gather as much data as I can from the client and validate that data on brokerage, bank, credit card statements in order to then start addressing the needs that we have when we establish the relationship. After gathering data, the next step naturally is to analyze the data. Well, let's bring out the cannons, let's bring out the guns in the financial planning software. Let's plug that data in and start seeing, using our analytical abilities and tools, what we need to do to help the client meet those goals. While we're analyzing data, we may have to go back to the client and ask for more. We may have to go back to the client, well, we've analyzed some of your data and it just doesn't look like we can meet all your goals, so maybe help us prioritize those goals. So the analyze data step is the first time we may have to go back to the client and revisit domains 1 or 2. Now, the next set of domains I call the recommendation domains. All right, these recommendation domains, the 4th, 5th, and 6th domains of the planning process. First up, develop the recommendations. We want to develop recommendations, maybe give the client 2 to 3 to 4 options and coach them towards the one that we feel maybe is most appropriate, but we always want to show the client alternative actions as well. We want to say, well, you've talked about home buying, we can get 20% down, and that's what I suggest, but I want you to know we can maybe do an FHA loan, a slightly higher interest rate, maybe we can only put 5% down on that FHA loan. All right, we're going to develop recommendations. The next step in the planning process, we're talking about communicating those recommendations to the public. It's great that we've developed recommendations and we can develop the sharpest recommendations available. But if the client doesn't really understand where we're coming from, then those recommendations aren't very good. So we want to communicate. And we have to be very careful with sensitive markets and how we communicate those. Are we working with maybe a client who's 85, 90 years old? Well, we just want to make sure that they understand, perceive cognitively with us on that. Are we working with a client from a different cultural or language background? Again, communication becomes vital. The last of our recommendation domains is to implement the recommendations. So we've developed, we've communicated, it's time to put those into action. So that's sort of our domains of recommendation we want with the client. And our last two domains, the seventh and eighth. The seventh is to monitor the recommendations. Well, in financial planning, it's not enough just to make the sale. It's not enough just to place the product. We have to monitor those recommendations ongoing. And lastly, practice professionally. This domain I like to think of is the circle that all the other domains fall in. What does practice professionally mean? Well, if you are a registered investment advisor, it means following the SEC rules of an investment advisor. If you are a broker or a broker-dealer, follow the rules of a broker. If you want to hold out the CLU or CHFC mark, you need to follow the rules set forth by the CLU and CHFC. We'll cover those in Chapter 3. And if you're a CFP professional, you need to follow the rules set forth by the CFP board. Practice professionally. You want to follow professional, legal, and regulatory standards through each step of the process.